The knock came at 6:47 in the evening. I know the exact time because I had been watching the clock since 4 o'clock, which was when my daughter Rebecca said she'd stop by. Then 5 o'clock, when my son Michael usually finished work. Then 6 o'clock, when I finally accepted that nobody was coming, and I should stop waiting by the window like a dog whose owner left for work 8 hours ago. I was sitting in my armchair, the green one Margaret and I bought in 1983 that should have been replaced a decade ago but still held me the way it always had. Eating a sandwich I'd made from the last of the roast beef. No cake, no candles, just a man, a sandwich, and the specific kind of silence that fills a house when you realize you're the only person in the world who remembers it's your birthday. The knock was firm. 3 times. Authoritative. Not the tentative tap of a neighbor checking if I was still alive or the quick double knock of a delivery driver who didn't want to wait for an answer. I set down my sandwich. My knees made their usual complaint as I stood, arthritis in the left one, old football injury in the right that I got in 1961 and that still had opinions about weather changes. I walked to the door slowly because walking fast stopped being an option around 74 and I'd made my peace with it. Through the frosted glass panel I could see a silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, male probably, holding something. I opened the door. The young man standing on my porch was maybe 35, wearing a gray coat that looked expensive and holding a bakery box in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. He had dark hair starting to gray at the temples and eyes that were doing something complicated. Looking at me like he was trying to solve an equation he'd been working on for a very long time. "Mr. Holloway?" he said. "Thomas Holloway?" "That's me," I said. "My name is David Chen," he said. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I've been looking for you for 3 years, and I think we need to talk." I looked at him, at the bakery box, at the envelope, at the expression on his face that was part nervous and part determined. "It's my birthday," I said. I don't know why I said it. It just came out. David Chen's expression shifted. Something softened. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm here." And that's when I knew, in the way you sometimes know things without being told, that my 80th birthday was about to become something I'd remember for however many birthdays I had left. Welcome to Family Reckoning. I'm grateful you found this story today. Let me know you're with me. Drop your state or country in the comments so I can see where this is reaching. Quick note. This story contains some fictionalized elements for dramatic and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is coincidental, but the lesson here, that's as real as they come. Let's begin. I was born in 1945 in a 2-bedroom house in Greensboro, North Carolina, to parents who had survived the Depression and the war and believed that survival was the primary requirement of a successful life. Everything else, happiness, fulfillment, purpose, those were luxuries you pursued if survival left you any energy, which it usually didn't. I grew up understanding that life was work. You worked to eat. You worked to keep a roof overhead. You worked to raise children who would work to do the same. That was the cycle. That was the point. I met Margaret Riley in 1966 at a church social. She was 20, teaching 1st grade at an elementary school on the east side of town. I was 21, working at a textile mill and taking night classes in accounting because my father said accounting was steady work and steady was all that mattered. We married in 1967. Small wedding. Margaret's parents, my parents, 23 guests, and a reception in the church basement with sandwiches and a cake Margaret's mother made herself because hiring a baker was an unnecessary expense. We were happy. I want to be clear about that. For 31 years, we were happy. Not the explosive, passionate kind of happiness you see in movies. The steady kind. The kind built on shared routines and inside jokes and knowing that the person sleeping next to you would still be there in the morning. Rebecca was born in 1969. Michael in 1972. I worked at the mill until it closed in 1981, then got a job doing bookkeeping for a construction company. Margaret taught 1st grade until she retired in 1998. We saved money. We took modest vacations. We raised 2 children who went to college and got decent jobs and called us on Sundays. Margaret died in 2014. Heart attack. She was making dinner. Pot roast. the same recipe she'd been making for 40 years. And she sat down at the kitchen table and said, "I feel strange, Tom." And then she was gone. I was 69 years old. We'd been married for 47 years. And suddenly I was alone in a house that still smelled like pot roast and had her reading glasses on the end table and her slippers by the side of the bed. The children came for the funeral. Rebecca flew in from Phoenix with her husband and 2 teenage daughters I barely recognized because I'd only seen them twice in the last 5 years. Michael drove up from Atlanta with his wife Jennifer. They stayed through the weekend. They helped me organize Margaret's things. They asked if I needed anything. Then they left, back to their lives, their jobs, their own families, and I stayed, in the house, in the silence, learning what it meant to be the last one left. The first few birthdays after Margaret died, the children made an effort. 70. Rebecca sent a card and called. We talked for 11 minutes. She asked how I was. I said fine. She said the girls were doing well in school. I said that was good. Then we ran out of things to say and she said she loved me and I said I loved her too and we hung up. Michael came by that year. Brought his family. We had dinner at a steakhouse. It was pleasant. Slightly awkward. We'd never been a family that knew how to fill silence with conversation. And with Margaret gone, the silence got louder. 71 through 74. Cards. Phone calls. Occasionally a visit, but less frequently. Rebecca's daughters were in high school, then college. Michael's career was demanding. Everyone was busy. I understood. I didn't take it personally. I had made friends with the silence by then. I'd learned how to cook small meals for one person. I'd learned that Tuesday afternoons at the library were quiet and the librarian, a woman named Phyllis, would sometimes recommend books without being asked. I'd learned that if you go to the same diner every Saturday morning and order the same breakfast, the waitress eventually stops asking what you want and just brings it. 75 through 79. The calls got shorter. The cards sometimes arrived a week late, like they'd been remembered at the last minute. The visits stopped almost entirely. I didn't blame them. I want to be clear about that too. My children had their own lives, their own struggles, their own children who needed attention more than an old man who was doing fine on his own. I was doing fine on my own. That's what I told myself. Every birthday, every holiday, every evening I sat in the green armchair with a sandwich and the television playing something I wasn't really watching. I was fine. My 80th birthday fell on a Thursday. I woke up at 6:30. Same time I'd been waking up since 1963 when the textile mill shift started at 7 o'clock and the habit embedded itself so deep that retirement couldn't shake it. I made coffee. 2 cups. Black, in the same mug I'd been using for 30 years. I sat at the kitchen table and looked out the window at the backyard Margaret had loved and that I now maintained out of obligation more than affection. The grass needed mowing. I'd do it Saturday. Maybe. At 9 o'clock my phone rang. "Rebecca, happy birthday, Dad," she said, and her voice had the bright, slightly rushed quality of someone making a call between other tasks. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. "How are you feeling?" 80. "That's a big one." "Feel about the same as 79, I said, which was true. "Listen, Dad, I'm so sorry, but I can't make it out this year. Melissa's got college orientation this weekend and Brian's traveling for work and it's a lot right now." "That's fine," I said. "I understand. I'm sending a card, and a gift card, to that steakhouse you like." "You don't have to do that." "I want to. You should go out. Treat yourself. Maybe invite one of your friends." I didn't tell her I didn't have friends in the way she meant. I had acquaintances. The waitress at the diner. Phyllis at the library. The man next door who waved when we both happened to be getting our mail at the same time. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too." We hung up. The house was quiet again. At 11 o'clock, Michael texted, "Happy birthday, Dad. Slammed at work today but thinking of you. Let's catch up soon." I texted back, "Thank you. Talk soon." We wouldn't talk soon. I knew that. He knew that. But it was a thing we said because saying it felt better than not saying it. At 2 o'clock, I walked to the grocery store 3 blocks away and bought the roast beef for a sandwich. The cashier, a young woman with pink streaks in her hair whose name tag said Brittany, didn't ask if it was my birthday. Why would she? I was just an old man buying lunch meat on a Thursday afternoon. At 4 o'clock, I sat by the window, telling myself I wasn't waiting for anyone but knowing I was lying. At 6 o'clock, I accepted that nobody was coming. At 6:47, David Chen knocked on my door holding a bakery box and a manila envelope and 3 years of searching. I invited him in because, at 80 years old, you reach a point where strange possibilities are more interesting than predictable loneliness. David Chen stood in my living room looking around with the careful attention of someone trying to reconcile what they expected with what they found. His eyes moved across the furniture, the green armchair, the couch Margaret had reupholstered in 1989, the bookshelf with photos from when the children were young. "Nice home," he said. "It's old," I said. "Like me. Can I ask what this is about?" David set the bakery box on the coffee table. "It's a cake," he said. "Chocolate. I didn't know if you like chocolate, but the woman at the bakery said most people do, so I took a chance." I looked at the box. Nobody had bought me a cake in 6 years. "And the envelope?" I asked. David held it for a moment, like he was deciding something. Then he sat down on the couch. "Mr. Holloway, do you remember working at the textile mill in the early 70s? I worked there from 1963 to 1981, I said. "That's a lot of years to remember specifically. Do you remember a woman named Lin Chen?" The name landed somewhere deep. I sat down in the green armchair. "Lin," I said quietly. "Yes, I remember Lin." Lin Chen had started at the mill in 1970. She was 23, recently immigrated from Taiwan, spoke limited English, and had been assigned to the quality control line where I was working as a floor supervisor. The other workers had been not unkind but not welcoming either. In 1970 in Greensboro, a Chinese woman working a factory line was unusual enough to generate suspicion disguised as curiosity. I had made it my business to make sure she was treated fairly, helped her learn the processes, corrected the other workers when their curiosity crossed into something meaner, made sure she got the same breaks, the same pay, the same respect as everyone else. It hadn't been heroic. It had just been decent. Lin worked at the mill for 3 years. Then she left, got a better job, I assumed, or moved on. I never saw her again. "Lin Chen was my mother," David said. I looked at him. The dark hair, the eyes. Yes, I could see it now. "How is she?" I asked. David's expression shifted. "She passed away 4 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Before she died, she told me about the mill, about how hard those first years in America were, how isolated she felt, how some of the workers made it worse. He paused. "And she told me about you, about the supervisor who made sure she was treated with dignity, who helped her when she needed it, who never asked for anything in return." I didn't know what to say to that. It had been 50 years. I'd barely thought about Lin Chen in decades. "She wanted me to find you," David continued, "to thank you. She tried a few times herself over the years, but you'd moved, and she didn't have resources to track you down. Before she died, she made me promise I'd keep looking." He opened the manila envelope. Inside were photographs. Lin as a young woman, I recognized her immediately. Lin older, smiling, standing with a man I assumed was her husband. Lin with 2 children, one of them clearly David. And at the bottom, a letter, handwritten, addressed to me. "She wrote this 15 years ago," David said. "She kept updating it, adding to it. The last entry is from 2 weeks before she died." He handed it to me. I took it with hands that had started shaking slightly, though whether from age or emotion I couldn't tell. I didn't read the letter right away. I held it, looked at Lin's handwriting, careful, deliberate, the writing of someone for whom English was a learned language and therefore treated with particular respect. "Why today?" I asked. "Why my birthday?" David smiled slightly. "Mom kept meticulous records. She had a notebook with information about people who'd been important to her. Your birthday was in there. She'd written, if you find him, visit him on his birthday. Everyone should have someone visit them on their birthday. Something broke open in my chest. Not dramatically, quietly, the way ice breaks on a lake in early spring. I've been looking for 3 years, David continued. Wrong Thomas Holloways in 4 different states. Dead ends. False leads. Then 6 months ago, I found a property record that matched. I've been planning this visit for 3 months. Wanted to get it right. I looked at the bakery box, at the envelope, at this man who'd spent 3 years searching for a stranger because his mother had asked him to. Would you like some coffee? I asked. David's smile widened. I'd love some. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Margaret had said she felt strange 10 years earlier, where I'd eaten 1,000 solitary meals since. And I read Lynn's letter while David drank coffee and waited. The letter was 15 pages. Handwritten. Added to over years. Dated at the top of each section. April 2005. Mr. Holloway, I don't know if I will ever find you, but I wanted to write this down so my children would know. When I came to America, I was alone and scared and didn't understand this country. You were the first person who treated me like I was someone who mattered. Not because you wanted something, just because it was right. That changed everything for me. It gave me the courage to stay, to build a life here. I want you to know that everything good that came after, my family, my career, my children, started with your kindness. November 2010. I have been thinking about the day you corrected that man who called me China doll and said it was disrespectful. He was angry. You didn't care. You said, her name is Lynn. Use it. Such a small thing. But I remembered it every time someone tried to diminish me afterward. I remembered that someone had stood up. That gave me permission to stand up for myself. March 2015. I am sick. The doctors say I have maybe a year. I have made my son David promise to find you, to give you this letter, to tell you that your kindness mattered. I raised 2 children. I built a career as a nurse. I helped people. I lived a good life in this country. And it started because one man decided to treat a scared young woman with dignity. You probably don't remember me, but I have never forgotten you. September 2015, 2 weeks before she died, David has promised to find you. I believe him. When he does, please know this, you saved my life. Not dramatically, quietly, by being decent when you didn't have to be. The world needs more people like you. I wish I could thank you in person. Please accept this letter and my eternal gratitude. Lynn Chen. I set down the letter. My eyes were wet. I wiped them with the back of my hand. I didn't do anything special, I said. I just treated her like a human being. That was special, David said quietly. Especially then. Especially there. We sat in silence for a moment. She became a nurse? I asked. ICU nurse. 30 years. Saved more lives than I can count. David pulled out his phone, showed me photos. Lynn in scrubs, older now, smiling with colleagues. Lynn receiving an award. Lynn with her grandchildren. She had grandchildren? I said. 3. My sister has 2, I have 1. Mom was an amazing grandmother. He paused. She told us stories about you. About the mill. About dignity and standing up. Those stories shaped how we saw the world. I looked at this man sitting at my kitchen table. This stranger who wasn't a stranger. This person who existed in some small way because I'd done something I'd barely remembered doing. I have something else, David said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Mom left this for you. She wanted you to have it. Inside the box was a watch. Simple. Silver. Engraved on the back. Time well spent. Thank you. LC. She bought it 20 years ago, David said. Kept it in her dresser. Told me, when you find Mr. Holloway, give him this. Tell him his time mattered. I held the watch. It was warm from being in David's pocket. I put it on. Fit perfectly. There's one more thing, David said. And this is from me, not Mom. I'm a cardiovascular surgeon. I live in Durham. About 40 minutes from here. I'm married. I have a daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 6. He pulled out his phone again, showed me a photo. A little girl with dark hair and her grandfather's eyes. Mom made me promise to find you and thank you. That's done. But I'd like to ask you something else. He looked at me directly. Would you be willing to have dinner with my family? Once a month, maybe? Lily's at the age where she needs to understand where she comes from. The sacrifices people made. The kindness of strangers that made our life possible. And honestly, my family could use someone like you around. I stared at him. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you treated my mother with dignity when it cost you nothing and gained you nothing. I know you're sitting here alone on your 80th birthday. And I know that my mother believed, until the day she died, that the world needed more people like you in it. He paused. So yes, I'd like you to meet my family, if you're willing. I looked around the kitchen, the empty table, the silence, the years of birthdays and holidays and Tuesdays and Saturdays all blending together into the steady background hum of a life spent alone. I'd like that, I said. Very much. David and I ate the chocolate cake that night. Both of us. 2 forks, straight from the box, sitting at my kitchen table talking until almost 10 p.m., which was 4 hours past my normal bedtime, but I didn't care. He told me about his mother's life, about nursing school, about meeting his father, about the family they'd built, about the notebook she'd kept with names and addresses and birthdays of people who'd mattered to her. I told him about Margaret, about Rebecca and Michael, about the quiet years since Margaret died and the shape loneliness takes when you're 80 and everyone you started with is gone. You're not alone anymore, David said when he finally stood to leave. If you don't want to be. He gave me his number, made me promise to call, made me promise to come to dinner the following Sunday. I promised. At the door he hugged me, a real hug, the kind I hadn't received since Margaret died. Thank you, he said, for what you did for my mom, and for saying yes tonight. Thank you, I said, for finding me. After he left, I sat in the green armchair with the watch on my wrist and Lynn's letter on the table beside me. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not empty, just still. The way a house is still when someone lives in it and has somewhere to be in the morning. That was 6 months ago. I have dinner with David's family every other Sunday now. Lily calls me Mr. Tom and asks me questions about the old days and shows me drawings she makes at school. David's wife, Sarah, is a teacher and reminds me of Margaret in small ways. The way she listens, the way she notices things. Rebecca called 2 months ago. I told her about David, about Lynn, about the letter. She was quiet for a long time. Dad, I'm sorry, she said finally, for not being there, for not calling more, for not. I'm just sorry. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. She's visited twice since then. Brought her daughters. We had dinner at David's house. 2 families connected by a kindness from 50 years ago that neither family had forgotten. Michael came last month. Met David. Read Lynn's letter. Didn't say much. But he called me 3 days later and said, "Let's do better, Dad. Let me do better." Okay, I said. My 81st birthday is in 6 weeks. David's already planning something. Lily's making me a card. Sarah's baking a cake. Rebecca and Michael both said they'll be there. I'm not alone anymore. Not because my children suddenly became perfect or because I did anything to deserve it. I'm not alone because 50 years ago I treated a scared young woman with basic human dignity, and she remembered it for the rest of her life and taught her son to honor it after she was gone. That's the thing they don't tell you about kindness. You think it disappears after the moment passes. You think it's small and temporary and easily forgotten. But it isn't. Kindness is a seed. You plant it without thinking, without expecting, and 50 years later, it grows into something you never could have imagined. Family, connection, a knock on the door on the night you need it most. If this story reached you, I need to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me about a kindness you received that you never forgot, or a kindness you gave that seemed small at the time. Tell me where you are in your own story. Here's what I learned at 80 years old. 1. The small things aren't small. Treating someone with dignity costs you nothing and might mean everything to them. 2. You never know whose life you're changing. The person you help today might be someone's mother, someone's story, someone's reason for believing the world has good people in it. 3. Loneliness isn't permanent. Sometimes rescue comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes because you planted a seed 50 years ago and forgot about it and someone else remembered. 4. It's never too late to connect, to reach out, to say yes when someone offers you a place at their table. I thought my life was over. I was wrong. It was just waiting for the next chapter. 5. Your children need to hear these stories. Lily is 6 years old and she knows about her grandmother's courage and a stranger's kindness and how the two of them together made her life possible. That's a better inheritance than money. These stories aren't easy to tell, but I tell them because somewhere out there is someone sitting alone wondering if anyone remembers them. Someone wondering if their life mattered. Someone eating a sandwich on their birthday trying to convince themselves they're fine. You're not fine. You're lonely, and that's okay. It's okay to admit it. And somewhere out there might be a David Chen looking for you. Someone whose life you touched without knowing it. Someone who remembers. Until they find you, be the kind of person worth finding. Be decent. Be kind. Treat people with dignity even when it costs you nothing and gains you nothing. Because 50 years from now, when you're sitting alone in a green armchair on your 80th birthday, that kindness might knock on your door holding a bakery box and a letter and 3 years of searching. And it might save your life the way you once saved someone else's. If this reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Family Reckoning so you never miss a story like this. And comment below. Tell me about the Chen in your life, the person you helped, the person who helped you, the kindness that mattered. Thank you for staying to the end. It means everything. One final note. Some elements of this story are fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. If that's not your style, I understand. But the core truth, that kindness plants seeds that grow in ways you never expect, that's real. That's always real.